Hi guys, I thought I'd do something a little bit different today. I thought I'd do a video on FM. One of the things that you probably noticed is the tone can be quite negative on the discussion pieces on the LinkedIn posts, and it's not actually for that. It's actually for getting the discussion going, because you probably notice you'll see a lot of people that have the solutions already. If you look at Ian Upton from assets and a health and safety perspective, you look at George Stevenson from better information management and BIM modelling, you could take your pick. You'll see that they already know where the solutions are, because a lot of these solutions are not new. They've often just been ignored. And I get it, because years ago, a bit like the auditing, I used to go out and would be the equivalent of a third-party auditor. So even on a new contract, I would come in as a consultant and do a condition survey, do an asset survey. The difference being the two is the condition aspect is of all the assets, and the actual asset survey is also to identify where there's gaps, because a lot of the time the contracts don't actually match what's actually on site. Now, my goal in all of that is purely information. But if both parties get it at the same time, that's the ones paying the FM provider and the FM provider, they're both at the same space to actually come to resolutions for the contract. I'm finding that piece has disappeared over the years. You'll see clients that will push all the responsibilities onto the FM provider to do the surveys. The FM provider best interests obviously can be the main driver of what they want out of a survey, which also includes keeping the cost down to keep the client happy to maintain the contract. Especially if we've done it wrong already. Because the reality is, first thing a client's going to do is, why didn't you raise the awareness before? And this is a theme that's been ongoing for a long time now. Now, this sort of drops into why I'm a big supporter of the BIM group, the Better Information Management group, and the Golden Thread. Because although the Golden Thread is primarily focused on Regulation 38 at the minute, and the requirements on handing over the documentation and the owner of the building taking that responsibility that the information is correct, the reality is we're burning through money, because my view is we should be doing it for everything anyway. If you're a owner of a building, there is nothing wrong with having all your assets identified. Reality is, if you decide you're not investing in those buildings, you just move them, run to fail. But at least they exist. At least you've got a risk. At least you've identified what your true contract is worth. Because one of the problems that I regularly experience is the contracts themselves are being maximised by the FMs. In other words, trying to accommodate as much as possible. They're outside of their original scopes because the asset numbers don't tally up. A simple example of that is, say you've got a, let's say, door access system. Originally it's got 40 doors. Local authority takes on a couple of floors in the building. There's now 160 door access points. And they've taken it from a cheaper system and gone Pacman. As such, their lifecycle replacement budget, bizarrely, doesn't match the original system. And because it's not documented correctly, because somebody wrote it down as access system rather than an asset-based approach, the budgets no longer matter. Until you get to probably about 15 years, or until you're looking at your financial pots and realise they're looking a bit light, and you've got a problem. Because you should have identified that equipment is not yours. And that's all parties. That's the clients, that's the tenants, that's the local authority, that's the FM. Because you can then scope it in with some cost to it. Because its failure does not benefit any party. Its failure means that you have taken the money from others, so it could come from fire doors or something else that's essential to accommodate a change that was never in the budget and in theory should never get paid for out of the life cycle part, free of charge. And although some people think that's a great idea, a win for local authorities or tenants, the buildings need to function. We need a collaborative approach of making all this work for the benefit of all. Because if you go down this route long term, the gap may start at, say, £50,000, and over the years it becomes millions. So the impact is significant. And this is why it's so important that collaborative working is done. Methodologies that already exist that were sort of ignored for a long time need to be adapted to. And at the same time, the best day to start is today. And I get your asset survey may be shocking. It's very rare that I go into any account and find that it's all pristine and they go, no work for me to do here. It's normally months or years of actually sorting the data out, unfortunately. But once it's done, it's very easy to maintain. It's all about the processes at that point and keeping it updated. But that gets me into another fundamental thing, which I used to do a long time ago with Carillion, is I would go and audit contracts. So I'd go into a site, this is when I was working with Carillion, and ask for this month's PPMs, see what's been done. Then I'll pick out some key ones, such as fire shutters, done every Monday. Great, let's go and have a look at them. Go and have a look. How far do they come down? Engineer that did them last Monday and has done for the last 6 years doesn't know. Why? Because he's tick boxed it. And the excuse? Well, it pulls the suspended ceiling down. Great. So why didn't you write that down? You can still attend it every Monday and just say, can't complete the task. Because eventually, somebody will notice that although you keep raising it as a problem, nobody's fixing it. And those are the sort of things that are important, even if nobody's actually actioning it. As an engineer, it's important that you stand your ground. I know some people will disagree, probably as an FM manager or whatever, because they don't want to approach the client about a builder's defect or another problem. But reality is, it isn't going to fix itself. And I don't want to be in the dock dealing with a court case or something that's saying, well, you said it was fine. It wasn't. It caused a major incident. It caused the loss of life. I don't want to be in that position. Do you? And then you get onto things like AHUs and new belts fitted on last Friday, and you go, okay, can we get, which one was it? Can we go and have a look? And then you got the Browning belts, the little squeaking, bearings not being done. And I know some of you guys say, well, we don't do the bearings anymore. Well, that's a choice. My view is, if you've got spare engineers, the old ways of working are still worth doing if you can do them. Because they extend the life cycle. Anything that's extended on life cycle keeps money in the pot, which means you've got reserves. Doing it the other way, you're running to fail, whether you recognise it or not, because the money will run out at some point. And I do see some people challenge me on this sometimes on the, oh, there's always reserve cash in the life cycle, especially on PFI, PPP. Well, with the hundreds of contracts that are due to finish, let's see how many are finished on a positive note. Because I find There's problems on every account I've been on for nearly 30 years, even pre-PFI. So it's not a case of, oh well, there's reserves in there, it's fine, because I've even seen the accounts misspent, where reserves, the contingency funds, were put down as fixtures and fittings on properties that didn't have fixtures and fittings. But it didn't stop the account spending £500,000 on tables and chairs and furniture for schools, wiping out their contingency fund, and in the same year needing an emergency request for £180,000 for the heating system that then failed. These are all real world scenarios, and I know I keep it all generic, and lucky enough I've been with a lot of companies, so it's not a case of any of these are sort of recognisable as one event in one contract, but I would say a lot of these issues exist on many contracts across the United Kingdom and elsewhere. So what's the solutions? This was the point. Well, the solutions are, come along to the show in the 4th of June, and you can come and talk to us. The solutions are already there. It's better data management, it's better engineering management. Upskilling engineers is also a practical skill. I always hear a lot of negativity around engineers, but the reality is, I'm an engineer. I put myself through college. I've upskilled for years. And most of the time, there's a lack of incentive for engineers to be upskilled because we don't encourage them to do it. So I do think there is more to this than, oh well, engineers are useless, just use subcontractors. Right. But a lot of the time, we've got some good engineers. We don't listen to them. Engineers spend all their time on the sites. They understand the sites. If they don't, that's probably when you've got a bad engineer. It's not hard to spot, but have they been fed the right information, given the right tools? Because nearly everything that is a problem in FM leads back to management, unfortunately. Which doesn't do me any favours because it's management that often write my contracts. But at the same time, we do need to take on board that the industry needs change in a positive way. We're looking at a crisis in the sense of we're losing a lot of people from the skills. They're retiring, they're getting old aged, and at the same time we're not backfilling. We also aren't using innovation to the best of our abilities. We're not using collaboration to the best of our abilities. We're not proactively looking at solutions on a regular basis. We're often talking about crisis. We're often ignoring the elephants in the room. We need to change all that. And that's why I recommend engaging with people like myself, because I see that everything is recoverable, everything can be sorted out. But it does take time, it does take effort, and it does take a lot of changes. Thanks for listening.